3 years ago when I decided to do this full time instead of just like a side project,
Mhm.
I invested in getting a coach. And that actually was a great investment. And I was very reluctant to do it, even though I was like, partially coaching myself. I ended up reinvesting in myself by getting a great coach that helped me both on the individual side of like what hangups I might have about starting my own business, and then working with me more on the business side and growing those aspects. And that was really, it set a really valuable foundation.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm your host, Regen, and today's guest is Danielle Bicknell, an author, facilitator, executive coach, and strategic advisor who helps startups and social impact organizations transform big visions into actionable change. She's the founder of DAB Collab, a consultancy that partners with mission-driven teams on leadership, fundraising, and community building. With a career spanning public, private, and nonprofit sectors, Dani brings over a decade of experience in fintech, edtech, and digital health, and is especially passionate about advancing equity and representation for women, LGBTQ+, and underrepresented leaders in tech and beyond. Her first book, Restorative Rebel, quickly became an Amazon bestseller, blending memoir and critique to challenge internalized capitalism and reimagine success, work, and well-being. And it's a pleasure for me to have her on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Dani.
Thank you. What a generous intro.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for coming, first of all. And wanted to ask you, when it comes to Dab Collab, your business, it's been around for almost 9 years right now. Wanted to ask you what inspired you to start this business, which also includes coaching for everyone who's listening to.
Yeah. I think that I've always been a lifelong learner and I'm an educator in many ways. And Dab Collab really started as a passion project because I had worked in the nonprofit, government, private sector, and had found people that I was doing mentorship with and doing community building programs with. And so I kind of fell into coaching. And then that over a long period of time, which was originally a passion project, turned into full-time work where I not only do coaching, but I get to work with teams to try and build measures, initiatives, projects, and just like internal frameworks as well, so that you can redefine success for yourself and wrestle with something that I personally wrestled with. And that's a major theme in my book, which is internalized capitalism. And so this specific version of what success, health, wealth might look like, and challenging that so you can kind of define it for yourself.
Cool. And so when thinking about the ideal client profile, just like I mentioned, we were talking earlier, we might have the right people listening. So how would you specify or describe the ideal client profile that you typically work with? Is there some sort of an industry? Now, we did mention a few industries in the intro as well, but is there an industry or demographic, psychographic that you typically like to work with?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question in the sense that have identified someone who, let's say, in a very stereotypical way, has done all the right things. They worked really hard. They try to go to a good school. They might have taken on a lot of student debt or other debt, buying houses, cars, or whatever to achieve these dreams, as well as economic mobility and like professional development. But after doing those things, still weren't feeling fulfilled, or the way that they were achieving that was not resonating with them as much. So something that I had experienced personally, I found in people that I was starting to coach in the beginning, and then eventually became a major theme in the book of how somebody that feels like they are a high achiever, that they want to be happy, but this vision of hustle culture, of fierce competition, infinite growth, kind of like these robotic metrics tricks for success that burn people out if they're no longer working. You want to create a better way. And so I've seen this across nonprofit, across private sectors, but somebody that has really achieved on paper what they never thought was possible in terms of economic success, but are still feeling lacking in some way. And so I try and capture that energy, help them reformulate different narratives of how they want to define success, and then work with them to figure out how they could build that into whatever situation they're currently in.
Cool. And this is the coaching part of it, or is it kind of like, well, we actually talk about all the what Dab Collab does for these people. So I feel like what you were talking about right now is the coaching part of it, right?
Yeah, because what happened is I'd been thinking about this book for about 6 years, but I started coaching more during the pandemic because they were unprecedented times. And I wanted to do a listening tour and do research into, kind of what was going on economically, socially, with people, especially executives that were navigating big changes. And through that is kind of where I started to develop my coaching framework, was using with clients. And then I used the information and the case studies to actually write my book, because I got enough feedback from the people I was working with that they were like, this is kind of unique. You're talking about this idea of internalized capitalism. You're asking me to define my own version of success. And I've never really thought about it in those terms. But the pandemic seemed like a really interesting time to experiment socially with how can we change these frameworks so that we can redefine success and be happy and healthier. So it ended up becoming my coaching framework, but it led to other things. That was like my book and my work at Dab Collab.
Cool. And so apart from the coaching side of it, what else is in Dab Collab for people?
Dab Collab, I primarily work with startups or philanthropic organizations. So that can be nonprofits, foundations, think tanks, sometimes universities, and create programs that focus on building inclusive economies. So I've worked in financial technology, digital health, ed tech. My specialization is really an early stage. So from a private sector perspective, that's anywhere from pre-seed to Series A. From a nonprofit perspective, it's from inception and incorporation up to $1 million in grant funding. So there's different metrics for what early stage is, but it's really about getting off the ground. So I provide program management, fractional COO operations experience to really help those initiatives from ideation to iteration. So then going back and doing monitoring and evaluation, seeing how we can iterate on those programs. So on a coaching level, it's working with individuals to create their plans. With organizations, it's how do you start something and then nurture it and grow it. And then with executives, it's how do you re-envision your organization to work for this day and age, this time, since things are changing so rapidly.
Thank you so much for explaining that, Danny. That is much, much clearer to me right now. So when finding these clients, this is a question that other coaches are going to find useful mostly, is marketing wise, what is working really well for you right now? And it doesn't have to be just coaching, but in general for Dab Collab.
Something that I realized worked for me that might not work for others is finding what is authentic to you in terms of your ideal client. And for me, it was personal. I was like going through a change, and then I met others that were going through a change. And so I started navigating towards those communities and creating deeper relationships with those communities instead of an approach to marketing, which is kind of one size fits all. Try and make yourself likable to a really broad audience.
Mhm.
And so when I started to fine tune of I can do anything from operations to strategy and growth, but framing it in this kind of post-capitalist framework of yes, but we're all humans. We need to live together. We live on the environment. So we need to create this do no harm principle is something that became my unique advantage. So it was a very slow burn in terms of it didn't take off right away as
Mhm.
a much broader marketing approach. But I found that I was able to have clients that very early on knew exactly what the value proposition was and
Mhm.
was attracted to that instead of potentially having a lot of prospective calls that really don't lead to anywhere because I marketed myself generally.
Mhm. And I like that approach too. It's not traditional for sure. It's not traditional marketing. It's very targeted. And you get to make these people feel like they fit very well with you at that point because the story alignment. And so, where's Dab Collab going for the next 1 to 3 years? Are there any specific business goals you're working towards?
Yeah, I mean, in some way, the goals are related to how I'm also doing a social experiment of recreating my own restorative rebellion. So, in the book, The Restorative Rebel, it's this idea of understanding that the current way we're living our lives is harming both the planet, our health, our well being, and each other. So, we can reimagine work or just like how we're treating ourselves, our families, our priorities. And so, as I'm experimenting with trying to live that life, it's also been a goal of mine to have a team behind it. And so, Dab Collab in the nature is I love to be kind of a behind the scenes person that works with other people. And then I reach out to my network of practitioners or consultants, depending on the project size. And I would love to actually have Dab Collab be a co op, a community, an organization that is more self-sustaining as opposed to kind of like a network that's not
Mhm.
as strong right now. So I want the Dab Collab to be a Dab collaboration,
Mhm.
collaboratory. Right now, I'm just having a lot of fun. And at the same time, I would love to move into spaces that are being deregulated right now. So, right now in the United States, I think there is a movement against knowledge, against information, facts, health, pretty much name all the categories. And so, working towards causes that actually bring back confidence and trust in information and science and international diplomacy and just kindness, I think would be wonderful. But I think that's a bit grander in terms of Dab Collab. But if I could house it under it and have my coaching be more, I guess, connected to that, that would be wonderful.
Right now, do you have a team?
I have a team, but depending on what the client is looking for, I'll connect them. But that is also in my mission statement about collab is that I think my wealth has always been in my network. And because in the 21st century, a lot of us are working in fractional capacities, or we have side hustles, or we have multiple jobs, or trying to do multiple things. And so I
Mhm.
love spreading like the wealth and the human capital in terms of connecting projects and people where they need to be. But in terms of full-time staff, I would say it's a project of one. And then
Mhm.
beyond that is my Dab Collab network.
Oh, I see. There's no full-time people. And when you think about hiring for these clients, you're hiring inside their team, or do you have kind of like associates that you would
Both.
come with?
So I have a network of like 10 to 15 people from operations, data, back end, front end, admin, fundraising, strategy, design. But that's part of my network. Since I also work with their teams, sometimes I have to choose from the people they have on their staff, or we'll do a mix of both.
Mhm.
So it can be one, the other, or both.
I do like the type of work that you're doing. It's really interesting being able to work with multiple companies and doing this in a fractional way. And just like you said, most people are going towards that right now, doing multiple things at the same time. And full-time work is becoming less common right now, especially now that things are going all remote, especially for our generation as well. And so when thinking about your business, what would you say is kind of like the main challenge or bottleneck for you right now?
I mean, we're living in a stage of capitalism that, as you mentioned, full-time work and a lot of protections and rights that we have don't feel like the same ones that our parents or their parents before them had. It's changing all over the world at different times. But I think a challenge is just navigating those shifts and trying to do it as like ethically and as aligned with your values as possible. And so in this age where you might have a lot of bad information or scams coming our way, it's like, how can we take a meaningful pause to figure out how to still move your business forward in like an ethical and a helpful way instead of maybe going with the herd herd mentality of like, oh, well, if everyone else is doing it, then I'm just going to do it. And so you can apply that to all aspects of your business. But I find that sometimes I have challenges because everything is moving so fast. It's hard to think fast and think slow. There's some decisions that you can think really fast about and you're like, okay. And then there's other ones where you're like, okay, I guess we'll do this because everyone else is doing it. And that I think merits a second of, but let me think about that because I shouldn't do what everyone else is doing just because they're doing it. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of, I would say, bad things that people are doing right now. So it
Yeah.
merits a moment to pause before we act. So that I think is not only a challenge for me, I think it's a challenge for everyone. But when you're running your own business, especially being a founder and working with a lot of other projects, those are external variables that inevitably leak in because we're humans that interact in that world. So just being mindful of that, like mindful of our humanity.
And to be more specific, actually, what I was looking for is in terms of like thinking about Dab Collab, and you either are thinking of growing Dab Collab even further or keeping it where it is. Where are you right now?
Mm.
Are you in a growth stage,
Oh,
or do you want to keep
yeah.
maintaining
I'm
where it
in.
is? And where is the bottleneck there if you're thinking of growing? Because if you're maintaining, then there's still bottlenecks there. It's like more of like challenges operationally, probably.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. That is a good question. I would say I'm in a research and development phase right now,
Hmm.
and I'm starting to reach some metrics where I'm bringing in enough money. I have enough projects. I can do some scoping, mitigate profits and losses. But I'm also a multi hyphenate individual. So I'm a parent, I have a family. It's very important to me. And so this research and development phase is figuring out how to create that healthy work-life balance. I'm getting enough right now, and can I be satisfied with that, or should I be moving to new growth is a question that I think I am still taking some time to figure
Hmm.
out. And so my bottleneck is, do I maintain or do I push forward? And
Hmm.
so I can follow up with everyone on how
Yeah.
that works out. But I think at every given time with being a founder, we all have those bottlenecks. And that one,
Hmm.
I think, is the one that I'm encountering right now.
It makes sense. And actually, so you'd say you are in a comfortable stage right now with your business.
Yeah, because as I mentioned, I fell into coaching. It's been an integrated relationship with the other work that I've been doing, but that's evolved into a lot of things. And I've gone deeper with my audiences, as I mentioned in my marketing strategy, instead of as broad. And
Hmm.
so that feels like I can create more stability in terms of the programs, the relationships, and I'm also seeing an opportunity to potentially branch out.
Hmm.
So right now I'm just wrestling with the question of, do I now reinvest to start to branch out in other ways?
Hmm.
Or do I continue doing this research and development to like learn more from what I've done so far? Because there's been like 3 stages. You mentioned it's been around for like 9
Hmm.
years, but it started as a passion project, mostly pro bono for 3 years. And then I got a little bit of funding for 3 years. And then these past 3 years have really been where I've been investing in it and trying to create my client base. And so it's both old and feeling like a new business.
It has evolved over time, basically. And right now, it's also like in a period of evolution still.
Yeah,
Going to a new
yeah, which
stage.
is might be counter to some people's beliefs about building a business, but
Hmm.
I didn't necessarily envision this being a business. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they find a problem or they find an audience that their solution resonates with, like that, you become the accidental entrepreneur, the accidental coach, and that can be really great. And others have
Hmm.
other strategies, but that one really worked for me is I didn't go into it eyes wide open thinking this is how I want to approach my business. It was, I was working across different sectors and on different programs, and I really liked being challenged in different ways in terms of addressing those problems. But then I found that there were common threads of the people, the programs, and the things I was working on. And that's when I was like, like, oh, I can build frameworks, I can work with teams, I can coach on this now.
It's so interesting. So you kind of like fell into your own business's market research without even like trying to.
Yeah, in some ways for sure, and that takes time. And I had a period when I was in my young 20s where I remember thinking I was too old to start a business or to do all these things, and that was 15 years ago. And now I'm starting new things all the time. And so just to audiences that might be telling themselves, "Oh, it's too late to maybe try something new with my business or try this new framework or reinvest in myself." I don't know why, but it's like in the past 5 years, and the pandemic definitely changed me in a lot of ways. It made me realize, oh, I'm not too old for anything. Like if I want to try new things. And so if you're feeling that urge, don't let that false identity of like, oh no, you should have done this a long time ago. Like if you have a passion for it and a plan, like
Mhm.
might as well.
It's just like Gary Vee says, it's never too late, and it doesn't matter what age you are on, you can always start something new. So I also wanted to ask you about, and this goes to a research that we're trying to do as well. When it comes to investments that you've done in your business, what have been some investments that you feel really good about? Either you learned a lot or get a good return from, and these are investments of time or money or both. And
Mhm.
what have been some investments that you would have preferred to have avoided, or like bad investments maybe?
Good investments are in the beginning 3 years ago when I decided to do this full time instead of just like a side project.
Mhm.
I invested in getting a coach, and that actually was a great investment. And I was very reluctant to do it, even though I was like, partially coaching myself. I ended up reinvesting in myself by getting a great coach that helped me both on the individual side of like what hangups I might have about starting my own business, and then working with me more on the business side and growing those aspects. And that was really, it set a really valuable foundation. And so it might be a hard investment to make. It very well paid off for me. I think a few like
So
tools became really helpful in terms of Canva. I do a lot of design. I do a lot of workshop planning. And so I'm like using slides and like small AI tools, I think from here and there. And then bad investments are, I think that for a long time, and I still struggle with marketing, is just kind of going with companies that like pigeonholed me or like didn't really get my value or brand.
yeah.
And I'm, embarrassed to say how much money I've spent on that, but I think that was mostly my mistake. And that was a good lesson to learn early on, is if you pay someone too much to create a brand and help you with marketing yourself and you don't really know how to do that yet, it's going to be really
Right.
hard to tell somebody else. So I took that lesson. I went back. This was about 5, 6 years ago, and then
Mhm.
used that to work with other designers. So in the future, I made better mistakes later. But
Yeah.
I'd say that one in the beginning really stung because I was excited about the outcome, but I didn't think as much
Yeah.
about the inputs.
And I wouldn't say it's fully your mistake, actually. So it's kind of like a mistake on both sides, I think, because if, let's say, you don't know your market as well, or your ideal client profile and who you want to reach out to with marketing, then they also shouldn't kind of like agree in a way, but they're just like after revenue, so it's a different story. But it's like if they didn't understand it, then they shouldn't have started in a way. So yeah, that is one. And when you mentioned the coach as well being a good investment, and based on our research last year, it turned out that coaches were the best investment that other coaches had made. So investing in coaching, since as a coach you want your clients to believe in coaching, you also believe in coaching yourself. So generally every coach has a coach. And was that a business coach or was that a mindset coach?
So I can give a shout out to one coach in particular at Coherence Studio. And so Melissa is a creative coach, but I think she's also a business executive, work-life balance coach in a lot of ways. I've known her for many years, but that was really what catalyzed, I think, the solid foundation for what ended up becoming Dab Collab full time. I didn't know at the time that I needed someone with, I think her skills were more around mindset. I thought I needed somebody with like a lot more like executive skill planning, but
Hmm.
what her coaching did was give me a lot of clarity about what I needed to do. And then later on, when I worked with a different coach, it was really valuable. And I've gone to, there's a few different communities out there, and depending on where you live, there's a group for everything. But
Hmm.
in the beginning, that was really helpful. So mostly mindset, but a little bit of business coaching as well.
It's such a great thing, not just for coaches, but for everyone, actually. Like, you don't have to figure out everything on your own. And there's faster pathways to working with a business coach. You still would have potentially maybe gotten to the same conclusions on your own, but just would have taken you a few mistakes before you would get
Or
there.
a lot longer time. I mean, what was so helpful is, and I apply this in my coaching, is you have to meet people where they are, not where you want them to go. And
Hmm.
so it's a two-way relationship, as you mentioned before with the marketing example, is not every coach client is going to be a perfect match. So that's why you have prospective calls and little meet and greets. But at the same time, when you're working with someone, to not just do it on your own, having that objective voice or that other person, for me personally, was so helpful because I can really go narrow.
Hmm.
And sometimes you can be very certain about something, but you do need a sounding board for them to reframe it and it to like bring clarity. So it saves, I think, a lot of time and just maybe a little bit of mental distress.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate your time today. And my final question is for coaches who are thinking of scaling their impact. And by impact, I mean making change in people's life. Let's say you're working with leaders, you're impacting the leader kind of like, has a ripple effect, impacts the whole team, the whole company, his family as well. For people who are thinking, for coaches who are thinking of scaling their impact, is there any advice you'd give to them?
Yes, just don't forget your humanity at the end of the day. In terms of scaling impact, you have to define that for yourself. But I think the most effective coaches are ones that work with leaders and acknowledge them as humans and acknowledge them as multi hyphenate individuals. And work can be a really valuable thing. But if we are not also addressing like our basic needs, like our health, our well being, our connection, then that light can dwindle and it can actually, like hurt leadership and hurt that ripple effect impact you were talking about. And so it
Hmm.
might sound simple, but I thought I would just bring it up because when you're working with really high achieving people, and especially as you're trying to grow your own business, you might feel compelled to burn yourself out or burn the midnight oil or keep
Yeah.
going. But there are little hacks you can do to just kind of reclaim your humanity, because in the end, you'll work better for it. And I think you'll help the clients that are looking to you for support better too.
Being in a better state of mind, your quality of work is also going to increase a lot. So thank you so much,
Yeah, yeah, you
Danny.
gotta walk the walk, or you have to, if you talk the talk, you have to walk the walk.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Danny. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast. For everyone who wants to connect with you or find you, they can go into LinkedIn and look up Danielle Bicknell. They'll be able to find your profile, or Danny Bicknell. And they can also go into dannybicknell.com, which is the website, right?
Yeah, and Dab Collab information about the book is there. I have my portfolio, and yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This was a great discussion.
It was. Thank you, Danny.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.